Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Flynn, and I'm here with
Scott Lang,
and we are the Band Dads. Here to bring you a podcast about something that we care very dearly about, which is music education and band.
Some of you are here because you want to learn about all things band. Some of you are here because you want to see a train wreck, and the answer is yes to both of those. We don't care why you're here. We're going to answer all the questions. We're going to say the things you're thinking. We're going to debunk all the myths.
Yep. This is the Band Dads Podcast.
The podcast by and for confused band parents.
I said the tagline. Hey everyone, Chris Flynn here again with
Scott Lang.
And we are now episode 4 here of the Band Dads Podcast.
We hope you're enjoying all of the content that we provided. And this one, we're going to turn the tables just a little bit, and I'm going to be the griller, and Chris is going to be the grillee. Because today's topic is something he's particularly experienced and an expert to talk about,
I
which
feel like
is
I'm being set up right now. What are you setting me up for? That was a nice introduction, by the way.
What's
Thank
scary
you.
is you don't know what I'm about to say we're going to talk about. It could be something incendiary. Like
That's
don't know.
what I'm saying. Yeah, that's kind of scary, actually. I don't know what I'm walking into exactly, but
We're going to talk about money.
oh,
So when we started this podcast, we knew there were a couple things that people wanted to hear about. Number one, why do we do band? Number two is how are bands judged? But we knew the hot button topic that everybody wants to talk about, but nobody wants to say is money.
For so many reasons.
Yeah.
It's
So
money.
before we begin, Chris, remind everyone what you do for a living.
I feel like we're going to find a way for me to say this every episode at this point, because I probably have so far, but I am a data analyst.
A data analyst for what type of industry?
I am in the banking industry.
So I think this is important because, and the reason we flip the tables, because I want there to be a healthy amount of skepticism to everything that I say.
Gotcha.
That someone with your background, your experience, your integrity, to check the validity of my beliefs about music and money.
Okay, so when you say validity, so I'm skeptical and cynical. I mean, just because I'm from the East Coast, that's how I am naturally. But
where are you from? Wait a minute, I'm from the East Coast.
Are you? I'm from Massachusetts.
I'm from Buffalo, New York.
See, that's why I have a Celtics hat on today. You guys can't see because it's a dark logo. But yeah, no, I'm from the North Shore, about 30 minutes north of Boston. So
okay,
my whole family's there.
How long have you been out west?
This year actually will be 20 years.
Oh, yeah. So I moved out here when I was 7 years old.
Gotcha.
For those of you who haven't seen the video, I'm only 32, and so
You don't think they'll believe that when they see the video? Is that what you're implying?
No one's going to believe my mop of gray hair.
I haven't edited it yet. Maybe I could make some magic happen for you. AI.
Okay, so you're a data analyst for the bank. So you're used to looking at numbers with a healthy sense of maybe disconnectedness and objectivity. How's that?
Yeah, no, that's fair. And based on some of the conversation, especially that we had, I think in episode 2, where there's a sequence in episode 2 where you kind of rattled off all of the benefits of band, right? I will tell you, as a data analyst, the last thing that I try and do is let anything I do be based on anecdotes. Like anecdotally, cute. Like you can tell me something all day long, that's fine. But until I have something tangible to back it up with my data that tells the same story, to me, it's an anecdote, and you just don't do things based on anecdotes.
Well, which is why I wanted to flip the tables, because I want Chris to approach that healthy sense of skepticism to the concept of money and music. Now, before we begin, I do want to tell you, this is going to be our first ever 2-part podcast.
Whoa.
I know.
Wait, so we have a special series within our special series.
Yeah, that just makes us special. Extra special.
I think
Special squared is what we are.
Special squared? Is that like our boy band group name? Like
we
Special
should
Squared?
do that. Can you sing?
Well, listen, these days with pitch correction, can't everybody sing?
Not me.
Nobody really sings anymore, Scott. It's all auto-tune and pitch correction.
The crap out of that.
Milli Vanilli made a lot of money for a while.
Part 1 of our money series is going to be focused on the conceptual understanding of the value of money as it relates to band. Mm-hmm. And part 2, which will be dropping in 2 weeks, will actually deal with the real dollars and figures that we associate with band. Sound good, Chris?
Yeah, money is just that triggering of a subject that we have to spend 2 episodes on. That's
absolutely. So, okay, set aside music. Okay. I want to ask you the question. I want you to answer this question for me.
Okay.
How do we determine value?
How do we determine value?
Maybe it's furniture. Maybe it's rice. Maybe it's a CD with a high yield. Okay. Tell me, as an analyst, a very objective, non-musical way that you would use to determine the value of something.
So you said a word there that actually was a word I would use, which is objective. So ultimately, my value is kind of what is my objective. Ultimately, is how I assign the value. If that makes any sense, like what am I trying to accomplish, or what's the outcome I'm trying to get to. Once I try and identify that, then I would kind of work backwards. So in this case, I don't know.
Okay, let me give you an example.
Sure.
Okay, so you would, how would you determine the value of, you would know how to determine the value of an instrument. Fair point?
Okay, sure.
Okay. You would know how to determine the value of a teacher's time. Fair point?
Yes.
You look at salary.
Sure.
You would know how to determine the value of transportation to an away football game.
A monetary value, we're saying, yes.
Or a
sure.
prop. Or
sure.
So I think we all understand that. But I think what we struggle to understand with is the softer side of value. So how would you determine the value of time?
So again, it depends on what the objective is, meaning that, and I know for band parents, your kids being in band, there's probably a lot of different objectives that you're trying to accomplish, but we just kind of have to pick one as our goal, which would be, let's say, I think in episode 2, you said something like kids in band have a higher college acceptance rate. Or something like that.
I wanted to talk about that, actually, that there's a value associated with that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So to me, but the first part is deciding what the objective is. And let's say that's the objective. It's to determine whether or not, in fact, kids who are in band have a higher acceptance rate going to college.
And they do.
Okay.
They do.
So that's the value. So now I have to prove that. Now that's, as an analyst, now my job is to say, okay, so I hear what you're saying, but I now need to prove that. I need to have data available. There's a couple different ways that I could look at that data to determine if that is actually a true statement or just something that you like to say to sell people on band.
And so and I appreciate that. You understand why that healthy sense of skepticism and objectivity means why I need to be the interviewer and he needs to be the interviewee.
Gotcha.
So I want to go back to time for a second.
Okay.
Time we can quantify, let's say, is an instructor gets paid $15 an hour.
Sure.
And the electricity to the stadium costs X, Y, and we're going to depreciate the brand new AstroTurf over a 15-year period. But can you quantify the value of time in a way that a student's not making bad choices because they have free time, or they're spending time around high quality individuals or in a supervised environment? Can you quantify that?
So I would tell you potentially. There's a couple of different ways that I, again, now I have to have the data available. So I have to understand what data points are available to me. So would you like me to tell you if I had data available, what I would do or how I would look at that?
Let's do that.
Okay. So let's say you had data available for me that I feel helps me get to that objective, which is, the value of kids not having that extra free time to stay out of trouble. Again, I don't know necessarily exactly what those factors are today, but once I have those data points available, there's a couple of different ways that I would kind of dissect them and look at them as an analyst to try and determine if I feel like there is a true relationship there and that's backed up by facts, backed up by data. The first one is something called the correlation method, which correlation, it's fairly easy to understand. So meaning that maybe I have to make the pivot table for you, but if I show it to you, I could probably still explain to you what it's saying, right? What its purpose is. A correlation model takes two factors. Let's say it's, again, the amount of time that a kid spends in instruction versus, again, I don't know if we say it's their grades or the fact that, they don't have an arrest record, whatever that second factor is that says they don't get into trouble. I run those two things next to each other. And ultimately, let's say how far they are in school, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, et cetera, something like that. Each one of those has a value. The correlation model, what it does is it assigns a numerical integer to determine whether or not those two things have a relationship. So for instance, if I say that every year a kid is in band, they're less likely to be in trouble, and those are two different factors. If those things are a true statement, then ultimately they go together. They have a correlation, which means they get an integer of a +1, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I want to give you a real life example that was actually running around. You actually danced around it.
Okay.
Is it fair to say, let's say we know that students involved in music have a lower lifelong drug and alcohol abuse rate. If we were to take a behavior and assign a standard norm. So if I'm making up these numbers as I'm wont to do from time to time.
Sure.
If 17% of kids have tried an illegal substance by the age of 18, and if we know that only 8% of band kids have tried an illegal substance by age of 18, can we assign a correlation to that? And then a correlation, which would then give us evaluation, because we know what the cost of rehab is. We know what the cost of truancy is, of intervention specialists, of dropout prevention coordinators that are associated with bad choices.
Sure.
Would that be a fair correlation?
So short answer is yes, though it's not maybe as simple as it's explained right now, meaning that you'd want to have a little more than just a 1-to-1 there. So meaning that like you'd want to analyze it maybe over the course of a lifetime. So not just to say, but let's say from the ages of, 18 to 30 or 30 to 40 and have each one of those be a different factor with a different value to it. But certainly the outcome is either you get a number between -1 and +1. If it's a +1, there's a correlation. You can clearly see it. So certainly those two things align. There's a true correlation. Whereas if we looked at those data points and it actually ends up being a little bit more sporadic, meaning some years it goes up, some years it goes down, and it's all over the place, then it gets a numeric value of 0 in a correlation chart, which means there is no correlation. Or the opposite, if we find what we think is true to be the opposite, meaning that no, actually, in fact, kids in band are really open-minded and they like to experiment more and they actually do more drugs than we. Anyway, if it was the opposite,
you've obviously met the trombone section.
If it was the opposite, you would be a -1, which basically means when one thing moves one way, the other moves the other. So it's a negative correlation. So those things would move apart from each other. So short answer is I can at least determine at that point if I feel like what you're saying is true, and that allows me to move forward to then, I guess, crunch those numbers and say, okay, well, now that I agree with you that statement is in fact true, then let's go through some actual.
I think you'll find it's important to agree with me at all times. So we're going to learn a lot about our podcast listeners in this because we're going to look at the drop-off data and we start talking about correlations and plus and minus. When we see the numbers plummet, we're going to know people don't really want to know our data. But I suspect, I do suspect that there's a healthy sense of skepticism among parents.
Yeah.
And that, they don't see the correlation. They feel it.
Gotcha.
But I don't know that they can quantify it. So let me ask you this. Because I do think there's and there's probably a term for this as a data analyst. I think there's some hard numbers that we can actually calculate. A scholarship is worth X.
Right.
You got a music scholarship. Sure. That's worth X.
Sure.
And then there's some other numbers that we believe are influenced. We have strong and longitudinal anecdotal data.
Sure.
But we can't say it with absolution. Fair point?
Yeah.
So what do you do with those?
Okay. Well, so this is where a correlation model works in certain instances. But again, when you're looking to have a conversation that's broader than just basically two variables, which is kind of what we talked about before, then you want to look at something that I would do in that example is called, I would look at a regression analysis. Okay.
Which
regression, which I think people probably have, if you hear that word, that doesn't sound like a positive.
My therapist uses that term a lot with me.
Well, believe it or not, in analytics, regression is actually not a bad thing. So what a regression analysis does is it allows you to take multiple factors to identify a relationship. So ultimately, what we need to do then is identify what our different variables are. And there's mainly two different kinds of variables in a regression model, which is independent variables and dependent variables. And the way to look at it is the dependent variable is the outcome, right? This is where you're trying to go.
Okay, gotcha.
So whatever that might be, whether it be a college scholarship number, whether it be whatever that outcome is, that's the dependent variable. Everything else that we feed into that as predictors are independent variables.
Okay.
So that allows, so a regression model allows you to feed in multiple different factors. And really what you would almost do is, I know everybody loved graphing when they were in high school, right? Ultimately, what you do with a regression model is look at the different data points on like an X and a Y axis and kind of plot them and say, so for this person at this age, they were more likely to do this, and put a point there and identify each one of those outputs of data, and then identify whatever the median is, and that median line that kind of goes up on the graphing chart, that's like the middle line. That's your regression, that's your predictor, but you can take multiple different variables and then identify what the median of those things is and come up with a conclusion. So to your point, we're not necessarily able to say this is exactly this. However, the relationship between those two things in a regression model shows pretty clearly and consistently, and enough that, big companies that maybe like I work for would be willing to move forward on decisions based on confidence of seeing something like a regression model prove the point that these things do predict this.
Using the regression, I want to use real life examples to a theoretical discussion. Okay. Using real life data, assuming the data I share with you is correct in previous episodes.
Yeah.
And using the litmus test of, it's enough information that a company would likely move forward on this. I'm going to give you some real life examples.
Okay.
The investiture of time by band kids yields to a better kid, either by they're around better kids or they're absent from being around bad kids. Do you feel, give me a yes, I believe that, and I think I could prove it. No, I don't believe that, or I believe it, I can't prove it though.
So
time.
Instinct is, I believe it, but I'm not sure how I can prove it, only because we have to define what a better person means.
Okay. But this is why he's the analyst. Okay?
I don't know. I have to have that definition
What
to say.
I'll call positive peer pressure, being surrounded by other high achieving kids.
Okay.
Do you believe you could prove it? Do you believe it's true but can't prove it, or you don't believe it?
No, I believe it's true. And again, I believe there are things like whether it be GPA, scholarship offers, things like that I could use as actual data to prove.
Okay, so yes, I believe it and I could prove it.
Yes, I do believe it.
Okay. Absence of making poor choices regarding drugs and alcohol.
So in that example, I would say yes. And if I'm going to prove it, you would have to be able to help provide me some sort of data that is either a survey or something that shows the results of people.
But we could develop it. You could prove it.
Yes, we could. Yes.
Okay.
We could come up with something,
a
survey or something. Yes.
Okay. Actually. Investment of a concerned, caring adult on a continuum of 4 years.
As to and
proving that's a fair point. The end result being more engaged, a child who makes better choices.
Yeah, I think there's some overlap to some of the things we already talked about. So I would say, yes, I believe that that's true. And I believe we could find a way to prove that tangibly. Yes.
Committing to things that are outside the school day and require a higher sense of investment and ownership, leading to a better child or more success in college or as an adult.
So I want to believe it. I'm not sure again how we're proving it. Are we saying again, do we do that based on how many kids are employed during that time or something? I don't know.
Kids who don't drop out, kids who continue their education or military service.
Okay. Maybe do some sort of supplemental classes somewhere else or continuing education, something like that. Sure. Yeah. Yes. I have to wrap my head around how we're acquiring the data, but I do believe it. And if we can get that right data set, I'm pretty sure we could prove that too.
Ownership and investment over buying an instrument or private lessons or going to a higher level, going for all region or all state. Do you believe that leads to a better human being? And could we put a correlation to it?
I'm going to say, yes, I believe that one. And I do believe we could find the data for that one. And that one actually is a little personal for me. So
okay.
I believe.
Oh, good. Yeah. Here's my last one.
Yeah.
Mental health. Because that's something kids are struggling with a lot right now.
Sure.
I mean, in band and out of band. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
A sense of place, a sense of belonging, a sense of home. If we could tie mental health, illnesses, depression, teen suicides, if we could tie it to non-band versus band, is that a model that you could prove?
So again, short answer is yes. I'm a little skeptical again on what data is available to be able to prove that, just because I know that's one of those, especially for kids of this age, it's such a difficult conversation to begin with, for them to open up and be willing to share those things and really even just tell someone that they're going through that themselves. So I think that's just, my skepticism is just, I would hope I would have the right data set. But as you talked about with, unfortunately, I'd hate to have to look at teen suicide as a reason to do any study, but we have to. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, especially if the goal is to prevent it.
Right.
Which
and
is
find
what
out
we're
what's
trying
causing.
To do. Yeah. So yes, I believe that. And I believe we could find something.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to give yourself a number, a grade. I'm going to leave it to you to decide.
Oh,
I want you to separate band dad Chris.
Okay.
From data analyst Chris.
Oof.
Okay. Now here's what I'm trying. And I hope you, if you're listening to this, you understand what we're doing is I want Chris's healthy skepticism. I want his professional experience. I want his expertise to validate, if he's able to, not only does band do the things we say it does, but how would we do that? But I want you to separate and say, okay, as a band dad, I am X number confident that band has done good things for my child. Okay. Even if I can't prove it as band Chris, the bank analyst.
Gotcha. Yeah,
and then give me a number, Chris, the bank analyst,
gotcha,
believes he can prove or find reasonable proof.
Gotcha.
I want to know to what degree of certainty as a dad you are that the band is good for kids, and what degree of certainty you are as a data analyst that band is good for kids.
Which side of me goes first? Who do you want to hear first?
Let's go with the band dad, because I'm really more interested to hear the skeptic side of Chris, the analyst side.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I know how you feel about band as a dad.
As a dad, 100%. There's no hesitation in me 100% believing that all of the things that my child goes through and the time that they spend in this activity is benefiting them in positive ways across the board. So as a band dad, 100%.
And do you believe, and as someone who has 5 children, and I think 3 of them are involved in an activity right now, Winter Guard, which is traveling to Canton and WGI. So it's a significant investment for your family. I mean, significant. In San Antonio.
Yes.
As a band dad, could you give me a return on investment? In other words, we've spent $8,000 on various trips, band fees. We're going to go to Canton. We're going to do my return on investment exceeds my investment. I want the dad answer first. You've told me it's worth it. You didn't give me a number. Did you give me 100%?
100% as a dad, I believe.
Okay.
Yes.
Return on investment. Would you say it exceeds your investment, and to what degree of certainty?
Well, again, now I'm just being skeptical because I'm skeptical to begin with.
Remember, Chris, the data analyst, is next.
No. Yes, I am aware. I'm kind of cynical anyway, so maybe that's why I'm good at analytics. But I'm confident. Again, and the only reason is
51%, 75%.
No, let's say 80. And the only reason I'm not a full 100 yet is because those kids are still very early in the program. And, my cynical side wants to leave that 20% just in case something happens later on. I gotta give myself a little bit of wiggle room, right?
In case your kid has a marimba accent, loses his right arm.
I have no idea. I've got to be safe, and I've got to leave myself some out there. So I would say 80%, which is.
They are going to Dayton, and anything can happen in Dayton. Have you been to Dayton?
I don't think a lot. Really? Does anything happen in Dayton?
No.
Okay, I was going to say.
Okay, so you've told us. I want to recap for the listening.
Dayton on our podcast?
Nobody's going to be
Dayton
listening to
listeners.
Hey,
I apologize.
No,
let me apologize now.
And to all the listeners who've been to Dayton for WGI and indoor percussion, indoor winds, you're welcome.
So why do they have it there? I don't want to get sidetracked, but why is it in Dayton if Dayton's,
my guess is it's economics. The facility
actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Mr. Data Analyst.
That actually makes
a very large,
sense.
basketball size arena. College holds 15,000 people.
Sure.
And they get it for next to nothing, and they own it for 3 weeks.
So it's cheap.
Yes. Now the problem with that is, and this is a different conversation.
Yes.
There aren't enough hotel rooms within a drivable distance of Dayton.
That's not good.
You're about to find that out. Anyway.
Yeah, that's not good.
We know that Chris the band dad 100% believes band is good. We know that Chris the band dad believes there's a return on investment, and we know that Chris the band dad is at 80%, leaving only 20% ROI, pending a freakish accident involving a marimba.
Which, in all fairness, 80% is more than enough for me to move forward on any investment. An 80% likelihood of return is more than enough for me to take that risk.
That would be an appropriate time to let you know that we're sponsored by Bandad Coin, available at all major cryptocurrency available.
So we're already selling fake adjudicator certificates to people. Now we're getting
selling. No, they're free. Although, should we sell them?
Oh, I didn't tell you? Shoot. I didn't realize we didn't discuss that change. I thought that we might be able to. We'll talk about maybe after.
Now let's go to Chris, the data analyst.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
With what degree of certainty do you believe that you, not total certainty, but you said business certainty, enough to move forward?
Yeah.
To what degree of certainty do you think you can prove?
So my skepticism. So yes, I am much more skeptical, and the main reason why is I believe we can reach the objective based on what I already know on the surface level of the activity. However, I have not yet actually seen the data. So as a data analyst, it's not fair for me to move forward with the same confidence. So as a data analyst, I'm probably closer to 70% versus 100 as a band dad, maybe even a little bit lower, only because I do believe that we can get there.
You just don't have the numbers.
I have to see it.
That's a fair point.
Have to.
Now you know why I'm the interviewer.
Yeah.
He's the interviewer.
Yeah,
okay. Return on investment.
Yes.
What is your number as an analyst? So if you spend $8,000, which It sounds like a ton, folks, but we're talking about 3 kids in band and traveling to Canton, and we went to Bands of America and a band fee, which is the cheapest band fee if our band director's listening.
Yes.
He needs to raise it. if you
got to make enemies in our circle. Oh boy, raise the band fee. This guy
raise the band fee, and you're going to find out why in the next episode.
All right.
Okay. What's your degree of certainty as an analyst that you could find $8,000 in value or more and prove it as an analyst?
It would probably be the same answer, just because again, I have to see the data that shows me that outcome. So do I believe it? Yes, enough for me to put myself over 50%, again, maybe closer to 70, but I don't want to go above that because I do actually have to have the tangible information in front of me so I can do some regression stuff and I can say to you with confidence, I'm putting my reputation on the line at 100%. Here's what it is.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
I'm surprised your number was as high as it was because your band dad was at an 80.
Yeah.
It was at 100% for, I believe it's worthwhile, and 80% you believe the valuation that you could find causation and return on investment.
Sure.
As an analyst, I thought the number was going to plummet and only drop 10%.
So to me, again, that's where I believe the correlation of those two things is going to be a 1-for-1. So if I didn't believe one was going to be as high, then the other would not have been that high either. So to me, if I'm going to make that statement up front at 70% or so, then I do believe that those two things will be the same. I believe they will correlate. So to me, that's almost just factual. That is a data point to say, if I believe this, then I'm also going to believe this is my outcome. So I will assign the same value.
Okay. So just to review, this is part one of a 2-part series on the valuation of band and money. And before we talked about real life examples and costs and figures associated with being in band, I wanted to talk about, first of all, how do we determine what the value of band is? Because you can't determine whether the money's worth it unless you know what the outcome is.
So I'm not even sure how you answer that question though, only because again, my objective or my value is not necessarily the same as yours or another parent that sits across from me.
There's my next question.
So it's so subjective.
I framed that because if you thought the last part was subjective, it's going to get a little more subjective. Like the little analyst hairs on the back.
Yeah, no, it's probably not going to go well.
Okay.
Yeah.
God forbid this would ever happen, Chris, but if your house were to catch fire and everyone got out safely,
yes,
what would be the one thing you would want to make sure you grabbed?
My pets.
Okay. Pets and all living things, excluding plants, got out safely. You could run back in and get one thing. What would it be?
Oh my goodness. Wow. I'm not sure that off the top of my head, maybe one of my SSD drives that stores all of the media stuff that I do for these kids and their memories.
We did not discuss this, but
we did not.
Ding, 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 ding,
yeah,
ding.
Yeah.
If you look at my notes, it says, what's the value of a picture or a video?
Right.
What's the value of a memory?
Yeah.
What's the value of a smile?
Yeah.
What's the value of a tear? What's the value of a feeling of love and belonging?
Yeah.
I think I'm not going to convince the data analyst, Chris, 100%, but I think the fact that you said you would run in and grab a hard drive because it has pictures, I don't know that I can assign a number to it, but I can prove value that you could have grabbed. I could assign a number. You could have grabbed something far more expensive.
Okay.
But you chose to grab that, which means to me that hard drive is worth more than what you could have grabbed your TV worth $2,000, but you grabbed a hard drive worth $50. So does that not make that hard drive worth more than $2,000?
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Monetary value wise, yeah. No, absolutely it does.
So that's the thing. I kind of want to close the conceptual discussion about the value of music is beyond, the hard numbers that we can't absolutely prove, beyond the causational numbers, which we think we can get there.
Sure.
That there's numbers that we don't even talk about that may be the most valuable part of this activity. And it's not just the things kids did. I have this memory of this. I experienced this. I felt this.
Yeah.
But it's the things they didn't feel, sadness, loneliness. It's the things they didn't experience, bullying, peer pressure, thoughts of self-harm. And it's the things they didn't do. Drugs, alcohol, dropping out. And there's a value to that, isn't there?
I mean, yes, conceptually there is. As an analyst, I wouldn't want to touch it. I wouldn't want to go anywhere near it. But yes, there absolutely.
Why wouldn't you want to go anywhere near it?
Because to your point, it's a negative. You're basically saying the things that we can't prove. I don't have, again.
But if we can validate that X percentage of kids are making these choices, X percentage of kids are feeling this way.
It's really all in the phrasing then, because if you're saying we have this is available to us, then it's just a whole different conversation. If we're again, we're talking about things that are, again, it almost sounds like instinctual or feelings, then again, there's no place for it in what I do as an analyst, if that makes any.
Can you separate Chris the band dad from Chris the analyst?
Yes. I promise you that I can. I promise you that I can.
Okay. And we're going to get into this in episode 2.
Only because it's not just a band dad, but like I take a lot of pride in being a parent in general. So yes, I definitely can separate the two, and the sincere and the emotional side of me can overcome for sure. Now that said, now I want to kind of, now I'm just curious, and I'm sure the audience is maybe curious as well, because, you know, this is such a stimulating show and they're very invested in the expert Scott Lang. They want to know if your house.
Can you prove as a data analyst I'm an expert?
You know what? I actually can. You know what? You know what? I actually can. The problem is, I don't know. Maybe I could find the clip and share this with the audience. But this is really like behind the scenes stuff. But I found out in an early conversation with Scott Lang that has yet to be revealed, and maybe I'll find a way to play with it, and maybe we can include it somehow. But before Scott and I decided to bring you the recordings that we're bringing you now, we actually did have some conversations prior to these that have not been brought to your attention yet. And in one of those conversations, I found out that Scott Lang
smuggler
is such a big deal that he is in fact published in the Smithsonian. True statement or not?
True. Do you know, this is going to sound braggadocious, but no one's listening other than the golden retriever. I'm in the Smithsonian.
Are you really?
Yeah, I wrote.
Like a picture of you visiting, or?
Well, it's in the most wanted section, but no, I wrote a couple of books on music education and on being in band specifically. In 2 of my books made in the Smithsonian, one is called Seriously, Affirmations, Observations, and Ruminations on Music Education. The other one's called Leader of the Band, and it's a case study on 9 music educators that I admire. Well, so I'm actually in the Smithsonian.
So next time I call you an expert, don't push back on me. You're in the Smithsonian, for God's sake. This guy. All right.
How many other people do you think that's relatable to that can say that? I mean, come on.
Maybe more than you think.
Okay,
I have 2 of my publications are in the Smithsonian: Leader of the Band and Seriously.
That's a big deal. Congratulations.
You're very kind, but the audience should know, in all honesty, that the Smithsonian collects one of just about every major publication that's put out there.
Here we go.
And so I'm not in the Smithsonian. I'm in a warehouse about 12 miles away, the size of 17 football fields.
Trying to be humble.
And I'm at the top shelf collecting dust. They use it to stand on to reach the upper shelves.
Well, you're serving a purpose then. You're serving a utility. Even in the Smithsonian, you have value, even if you don't want to give yourself value.
And you can quantify that value.
See?
I'm better than a stepladder.
That's right. What I was going to ask you was, okay, so your house catches on fire. Right. And assuming that all of your loved ones, your pets, and somehow your plants come alive and escape the house as well. What are you saving from the house? What's your
thing? It's either my laptop or my hard drive with all the photos on. It's 100% that.
Gotcha.
I was going to say it's my laptop, but it's not because of business or it's expensive. It's because that's where all my memories and photos are.
Yeah.
They're irreplaceable to me.
Which, you know, I will tell you. So for instance, value, right? One of the things that sometimes, and I've been asked this before, even by our own kind of, you know, band people, boosters, even sponsorship club, like to assign a value to what I do for our band, which again, I've been asked that question, and I try and think of it, you know, again, objectively to say, okay, if I'm providing this service, if I'm editing a video, recording it, the time generally I would bill this, and I try and do that, right? But man, I'll tell you, again, yes, I do have 3 kids in the activity now. We had 2 in the fall in marching band. So, you know, the amount of what I capture to include my own children is fairly small, to be honest.
Right.
But to your point, this is, can I separate the band dad and you know, the analyst? Just the enjoyment that I get to be able to provide memories for other people is invaluable to me. And it means a lot. And so much so that, you know, parents of seniors, you know, this is the first year I really covered the band in depth this past fall. The parents of seniors who just are so thankful. They're so grateful because this is the first time they've had this experience, that they've got this much coverage and they get this much material and all those things. So anyway, just to go back to the previous question, I certainly can. And a lot of times in my real life, when I'm not on the clock and not, you know, earning my salary, I kind of prefer the emotional me to the data analyst me. So,
wow. Well, I think, you know, that's a really good place to kind of stop this conversation. But I want to share that with a reflection before we sum it all up with you, the parent, which is Chris just said, is you can't quantify the value it brings to your life to watch your child in that experience. And when our son went to Music for All Bands of America in San Antonio, like I know all the people who put that on, and I called him and I said, you had me in tears because I was watching my son.
Yeah.
I've been to a Bands of America event so many times I can't even count it.
Sure.
But to see my son on that field was...
I know the feeling.
And there's value to that. So this concludes, for our listeners, episode one of Money.
Okay.
And we hope that you found it stimulating, that we framed it in a different way. And we hope that you appreciate that we had a skeptic and an analyst look at the numbers in a different way. We also hope that if you find this interesting, if you have some questions, you drop them in the chat box below so that we can see them and answer them on the next episode. And we hope that you found so much value in this episode that you want to share it with friends. Chris, tell them how they can get a hold of us.
Yeah, please go to banddadspodcast.com. Check out our website to get links to all the fun stuff there. There's some opportunity for feedback. There's a form on there as well. Send us an email at feedback@banddadspodcast.com. Send us a note. Let us know what your experience is. What do you value? Again, we love for this to be an interactive conversation, and we'd like to get more involved in going through some feedback of our listeners as well. So catch us there. And I honestly can't wait for part 2 because I feel like this is going to be the polarizing one, honestly. When we talk about actual money.
Absolutely. I'm Scott Lang, and he's
Chris Flynn.
And we're the
Banddads. Thanks, guys.
Chris, that episode was money.
Can you assign a value to that episode, Scott? To stay up to date with the Banddads podcast, visit our website, banddadspodcast.com. Want to communicate with the Banddads? Send an email to feedback@banddadspodcast.com. The Banddads podcast is a 5 Deuce Media production. For more information, visit 5deucemedia.com. That's numeral 5deucemedia.com. For more information on Scott Lang Leadership and Solutions for Music Education, visit scottlang.net.